We are all one people. Beyond one people, we just flat out are one. And that is the nature of today's talk. The art of inclusion. So first, let's talk about what an art is. And it was interesting, sometimes I use Facebook just to kind of see what's floating around in universal consciousness. And so I put a question on Facebook. What does the art of something mean to you? And I got all kinds of things. I got from a picture to a practice. Dr. Pierre Grimes, who was one of my philosophy professors, he teaches and practices comparative philosophy, which is where he takes everything and finds the common threads, and then in order to establish what's actually true in all of that, he uses an analogy format. So everything has to go back and be true, and go forward and still be true. And it's that place of unchangeability. And what he talks about art, he talks about something that comes from so deep within that it is effortless, that it is changeless, that if the same thing were practiced at the beginning of time, it would benefit the practitioner, person practicing it, and the observers, that it would do that same thing now, and it would do that same thing into the future. So an art of doing something is that place where we have tapped into that inner creativity, that inner activity that steps beyond the human expression and yet drives the human expression, if you will. It shows up as the human expression so that we're informing our actions from the soul rather than trying to make ourselves feel better from the outside. And what is this thing called inclusion? Now that's a challenging one because and I mean this with all of my heart, I love our current administration, our current government, because they are bringing forth everything we need to look at. As individuals, as communities, as townships, as counties, as states, as a country, as a global. And it's not about political party, because it's time for this stuff to come up. How do we know that? It's coming up. There's really no trick answer. We know it's time because here it is. And a lot of it looks like exclusion. And I thought about that all week long. And what I realized was that the attempt to exclude actually serves to include it in our thoughts. It's an interesting little trick that happened there, because the more we try to exclude something, the more we ring its bell. And you can't unring a bell. Those of us, and I'm understanding more and more every day what Ernest Holmes was talking about when he said to stand for something and against nothing. See, if I'm railing against something, I am advertising the very thing I don't want. I can be angry all day long about children being hungry and expend tons of energy about the injustices of how children are hungry, and criticize and vilify everybody else for those children being hungry. And at the end of the day, what have I done to feed children? Nothing. I have colluded with the problem. I have actively participated in keeping those children hungry because I've done nothing to the contrary. And what would change if every time I was irritated about what I perceived to be an injustice, I focused all of that energy in a solution? What would change in this world if we all did that? If we each fed one child, there'd be quite a few less hungry children. If we practice the inclusion of what we believe instead of spending all of our time shouting what we don't believe from the rooftops so everybody can consider a belief that we don't even want, because now we've included it in our consciousness. They don't hear our dislike of it. Brain just hears, oh, that. Well, let me contemplate that. And we feed it and we fertilize it. And the very thing that we're trying to change and transform grows. I thought about inclusion because I'm a lapidary. Used to have a jewelry shop, and I cut stones. And it's interesting to me that with diamonds, inclusions actually devalue the stone. And the more inclusions you have, the less valuable that diamond is. With moss agate, or amber, or picture landscape crystals, the more inclusions you have, the more valuable it is. Which tells me, as a race, we're not clear on what inclusion really is about. Because we think that there's something that can be included that doesn't have value or that devalues the whole. And we also think that there's something that we can include that up-levels and makes the whole more valuable. And the truth of the matter is, everything's already included. See, if we really understood our own teaching, we would understand that inclusion is simply the reality of creation. We are created out of it, and we live within it. There's no point of exclusion. There's no way to not be a part of. So there's no way to add anything. And there's no way to get rid of anything. That is our human mind, which operates in separation. And the journey, at least to this point, roll up your sleeves and get to work journey, the journey that often on the human level ain't so fun journey, is to bring the human consciousness in alignment with our Christ consciousness. One of the things that my native elders taught me is that the longest journey on this human path is this 12-foot drop from here to here. It's 12-inch drop, 12 foot. You're not that tall, right? It's one of those moments where it's like, did I just hear myself say that? Tell you a story. There was this wise king, and he would hold court for anyone who wanted to come. And what he was offering was solutions to people's everyday problems. And as the custom was, there was always an exchange. That people would come and say, this is what I'm working on, and the king would say, go do this, and they would leave an offering. And so he noticed this one guy was there week after week after week. And he never presented any problem, but he was always there. And so finally he singled him out and called him up, and he said, so I notice you're here all the time, but you never present any problem. Is there something going on in your life that I can actually help you with? And the guy's like, no, I'm good. I don't really have any problems. I just enjoy sitting in your wisdom and watching the miracles happen. And so the king asked him, well, you know, part of being present is leaving an offering. Do you do that? And he's like, absolutely. Every week I leave a piece of fruit. And the king was like, oh my God. Because he knows what happens is that his soldiers don't look at those gifts. They just take all of those gifts and throw them in the royal treasury. And so he's imagining all these pieces of fruit for the last 2 months in the royal treasury. And well, we gotta check this out. We have to fix this. So he went into the royal treasury, and you can imagine 2 months of fruit in the royal treasury with no AC, no refrigeration. It was like, whew. Being the wise king and understanding, he intentionally, rather than just sweeping up all the fruit, he picked up each piece of fruit one at a time to discard them respectfully. And as he picked them up, the rotten fruit dissolved, and there was a precious gem inside of every piece of fruit that the man had left. How often do we throw out fruit that we think is rotten without taking the time to see what's included? How often do we forget that in the wholeness of creation, there must be at the center a perfect, valuable, beautiful, brilliant gem. But instead, we just throw it out. So I want to bring this to us as individuals, as a community, and as the greater world. So on the individual level, I invite you to pay attention to all of the things that you think you need to get rid of in you. And I invite you to embrace them, to include them, to absorb them consciously, intentionally. Hold them as precious. Nothing to get rid of. And stop looking outside of yourself for something to fix you. You ain't broke. There is no self-help book that's going to magically morph you into being a better you. There are tools. But if you don't use the tools, it doesn't work. There's nothing that's going to come out of my mouth that's going to save you, because there's nothing in you that needs saving. You're not in peril. You can't be annihilated. None of us can. Now I'm not talking, I already hear my own argument. Dude, somebody can shoot you and you'll be gone. Yes, the physical container is temporal. I'm not talking about our physical container. I'm talking about the gem inside of this rotten fruit. Because I think we all have that part of our human consciousness. No matter what we achieve, no matter what we look like, there are points where we see ourselves as that rotten fruit. What if we just let that fall away and found the gem inside. Several of you have approached me this morning about, and I thank you for noticing, that I'm dropping some pounds. Okay? I am on a mission to become half the man I used to be. And here's how I'm doing it, so I don't have to tell 10 different people. I'm turning it into a spiritual practice. The human eye, doesn't have a clue when I'm really hungry, because eating is just an automatic function of being on the planet. And, if I'm happy, I eat. If I'm sad, I eat. If I'm tense, let's eat. It's a wedding, eat. Funeral, eat. Our whole culture is like, you're breathing, eat. So I'm re-educating my cellular memory. And this is how it's happening. It is absolutely a mindful spiritual practice. The first notion I have that I'm hungry, the practice starts. What am I feeling? And I shut up. And I time it 15 minutes. And as things pop up, I write them down. And then I ask myself again, what am I feeling? And I wait 15 minutes. And I do that 3 times before I put a bite of food in my mouth. Oftentimes, it's emotional. Sometimes it's mental. Because I am mental something. You know that. You picked me. Sometimes I'm thirsty. And every once in a while, and trust me, it is more, it's less than more, I'm actually hungry. And then I eat what my body wants. I am not restricting myself or being all jacked up about calories. I'm just doing that spiritual practice. And it's working. I've dropped 22 pounds in a month and a half. And if I ever get out of ministerial school, maybe I'll write a book about it. Because I don't want to read any more books. I'm going to write some. But whatever's bugging you, the point of that, make it a spiritual practice. To include it. There's no part of me that's focused on excluding any part of me. It's including. It's becoming aware of. It's embracing. And no matter what I feel and no matter what I think, I just write it down. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because it's me. Why do I want to get rid of me? How can I be here and get rid of me? Can't do it. So when we are willing to embrace ourselves, we are far more likely to embrace someone else. There is, in our belief system, we operate in the one. So if it's in you, it must be in me. If it's in me, it must be in you. I heard a practitioner the other day frame it as, if you spot it, you got it. And so what if we allowed that level of communication to drive our practice of inclusion? The things that irritate you, you spotted it. You got it. So instead of pointing the finger and vilifying that person, what if you made it a spiritual practice to stop and ask, where is that in me? Where is that in me? And I promise you, you won't have to look far. If you dislike being corrected, and you go, stop correcting me? Did you not just correct somebody? Oopsie. You know, you're being really judgmental, and I'm not okay with that. Did you not just judge? See, in order to call out the behaviors that we dislike, you go right there. I can't stand so-and-so's behavior. They're blee, 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 blee. Did you not just engage in the same behavior? See, we can't call names about somebody calling names without participating in the same behavior. We are all included. There is no separation. In spirit, we've always been there. And the Absolute has never once said, really? This? Mm-mm. When you get done with that behavior, I'll be back in your life. Never once. That's grace. Grace doesn't even see it. Now, I am in no way suggesting that we walk out of here and put on a set of social blinders. We have enough people doing that. We need to wake up, pay attention, take off the blinders, and recognize that everything we see, feel, touch, taste, encounter is ours. It's not somebody else's. We belong to one another. That's how included we are. When I look into your eyes, I'm looking into my own eyes because there's only one set here. But our brain sees the world as separate. And I invite you to just embrace that. Because these are the brains we have. This is how we're created. We're going to see the world as separate. Okay? When I go to leave, I'm going to get in my truck, not your car. Because my brain sees a separation between your vehicle, my body, your body. So that's okay. I invite you to get out of the politically correct vernacular altogether and up-level it to human accuracy. Instead of dealing with political correctness, because political correctness has a huge agenda, whichever aisle you're walking down. Started to say side of the aisle, but really, we have a complex now. We don't have two sides anymore. We have a complex with little offshoots. Great, because what that says is that the individuality and the brilliance of spirit is beginning to express more vividly. Yay! So quit worrying about being politically correct and start focusing on accuracy with the human experience. We create our own barrier in spirituality to true inclusion because we scare ourselves that we're going to make a mistake. I don't want to hurt your feelings. Okay? There were a ton of people posting the most politically and human experience incorrect photo this week on Facebook of Colonel Klinger from MASH in a dress with a gun in response to President Trump's comment about removing transgender people from the military. Several ministers posted it. Okay? So what? It's a point of education. Now, as a transgender individual, I had a choice. I could be really angry and really offended and put on my Captain Victimhood cape and come after you. Or I can sit in my treasure chamber as a piece of rotten fruit until I find the gem inside of me and respond from there. It took me, what, 4 days? Took a little while. Okay. So what? In the scheme of time, what's 4 days? See, I don't have anything to clean up because I took the time to go within, to embrace every person and their actions as a part of myself. Because if I'm being really honest, there was a time I did some of the most incredibly inappropriate things out of ignorance. And even if it's intended to hurt, we are each a choice. There is nothing that says you have to respond at the level of your human interaction. That kind of stuff is mindless. Reaction is mindless. You don't even have to think about it. Input, reaction. Requires no thought, no awareness. It looks like it's easy, and on a biological level, every time we do it, we're poisoning our own system. Because reaction at that level ignites our autonomic nervous system, which floods our physical body with chemicals that don't belong there for the situation. We think we're lashing out at somebody else. We're hurting ourselves. There's no separation, folks. There's none. I can't hurt you without hurting me. Now, the upside of that is every time I love me, I love you. Every time I love you, I love me. Every time I hold you in the preciousness that you are, I do that for me, too. So, I don't care where the starting point is. Just start. If you have to start with the dog next door that won't quit barking, start there. If you have to start with the mosquito, see, we think little things don't make a difference. Spend the night with a mosquito. And how would it be if instead of, all it takes, one tiny little thing that we can't do, we're smacking ourselves in the head, and the mosquito's already gone. We're getting ourselves all jacked up, cortisol is running crazy in our bodies, followed closely by adrenaline, and then we're not sleeping, and we do what? Blame the mosquito. We take all of our power and go, I don't even know where you are in here, but here you go. This tiny thing that we can't even see suddenly controls us as if we have lost our minds. And maybe we have. And maybe the simple solution is to find our mind. To go back to, how do we include that mosquito? Buddhism teaches me to include the mosquito and to focus on what's happening inside of me that I think is about the mosquito. To be in a place of meditation instead of trying to kill the mosquito. I'm not very good at it yet. And I say that in all transparency to invite you to dive in without having to be very good at it. Okay? Last night I got about 30 seconds into the meditation, and then I got the mosquito. And if I'm being really honest, I was way more proud of getting the mosquito than the 30 seconds. Okay? We have to begin by telling the truth. And if there are people and cultures that we want to exclude, start by telling the truth. Not to them. Let me be really clear so nobody takes my words and twists them around to give yourself permission to write letters to groups that you dislike and say, Rafe said, no. I'm saying own your dislike. Own your judgments. And then find it in you. What do you dislike about that group? What about that group bugs you? Where have you separated yourself? How have you separated yourself? I don't care why. Why? I didn't answer nothing. I can put why in a box and somebody says, why do you do that? Here you go. We'll see. There you go. That's why I do it. Doesn't change nothing. How do I do it? That changes something. Because if I know how I do it, then I can do something different. Yesterday in the diversity class, and I'll begin to wrap up with this, we did an exercise of proxy forgiveness. And we looked at something from the past that we wished didn't happen. And one of the students asked another student, but first they shared that, it's really challenging to keep hearing about all this white guilt because it feels like you're busy being guilty for something that you didn't even participate in because you weren't there when that even happened. And it feels like you're just wallowing in guilt so you don't have to actually deal with today. And so my question was, the person's question was to the group, if you had been back then, what would you do different? See, if the fact that your family owned slaves bothers you so much, what would you have done different if you had been alive when they owned the slaves? If seeing American Indians marginalized in your school was painful, what would you have done different if you could go back? What would you do? Nobody had any answers. That's how we keep ourselves stuck. So I invite you to be with those places, and instead of immobilizing yourself with guilt, shame, and blame for something you had no part of, recognize that it happened, that it needs to never happen again. How is it happening today? And what are you going to do about it? Let's take this into prayer. Recognizing the infinite oneness of creation. This source, this place that has no beginning, that has no end, that has always existed, that is simultaneously everywhere present, with no circumference. Therefore, its very center must simultaneously be everywhere. This essence, this source, this field of pure potentiality that we are born out of, containing all that it is within each form. This is the depth of oneness that we are with creation. And as I lean into the truth of this, I realize that point of absolute inclusion within me, without me, all around me. I realize the depth of inclusion that literally holds no point of separation. None. No spot where God is not. So I know with absolute certainty, in a palpable, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, experiential way, that every feeling, every thought, every touch, every behavior, every person, every four-legged, every winged creature, every element of life, I am one with, and it is one with me. Wo kitsuye. We are one. We are here to live and remember. Itakwi, we are all related. We are all one. And so I call the greatest and best of us forward in this moment and beyond. No more excuses. No more hesitation. No more blame. No more guilt, shame. But that we are called to stand in the love that we claim is our nature. And by God, we do it. Without hesitation. Without apology. Without reservation. We be the truth of our being. And we be that with one another. Grateful, so incredibly grateful to know this truth in my being. To be that place where the work rises up with a persistence that holds my human attention until I meet myself there in that chamber of rotten fruit to find the gem within me. And I stay with you until I find the gem within you. So grateful. So it is from this place of gratitude that I release my word, which is the word of the one spoken as me, into the law of itself that only knows yes. Already said it. It is done. And I invite you to join me in anchoring this prayer together as we say, and so it is. Not sure where I went, but I'm back.